basketball, football, baseball. From Division I to Division III, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
And you can follow us on all of our socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio. It is the most wonderful time of the year. Thank you, Mr. Andy Williams, because it is March Madness. Now it's tempered a bit because of what happened Thursday with the Wisconsin Badgers, and we'll get into that in just a moment. We'll get into some D3 basketball today as the women will play for their national championship. Oshkosh makes it to the Final Four. We'll discuss what happened there. But again, the women getting set to play for their national championship, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The money train rolls in at around 9:40. Our guy was 4 for 4 last week, Daniel. He's 7 of 8 since our return here to the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
Back.
So let's see what he has in store for us today. We'll do some headlines. And then the top of hour number 2, Representative Alex Dahlman, who represents the 39th district here in Wisconsin, who authored the NIL bill that passed this week in Madison and allowing, we'll say, some state funds to head to the University of Wisconsin as far as the athletic department goes, and what that will all mean, as NIL obviously is at the forefront of all of this. But the representative will join us at 10 o'clock, and we'll get a chance to ask some questions about how this thing all came about. How is it going to be utilized? We'll get into that again at 10. Now, I'll say this from the start, guys. I am not doing the low-hanging fruit of, is Greg Gard on the hot seat? I'm sorry. I'm not. You guys can. Jump in, bury me. Charlie can turn my mic off. I'm okay with it. But I get the angst. I get the anger of another first-round knockout. But somebody who gave us 24 wins this year, who has over the last few years evolved as a coach. We're not seeing a team now that only scores 45 points and wants to grind things down into the way Tony Bennett did at Virginia. That kind of, even Virginia now is a much different entity, watching them play in the tournament. It hurt. It's mind-numbing why we can't get out of the first round, being the Wisconsin Badgers, being the team that we were, having one of the most celebrated backcourts in all of college basketball. But this idea that Greg Gard needs to be shown the door, in my opinion, is a bit ridiculous. And I think it's a bit reactionary after what took place. And now Dan is going to fire away. Go ahead.
Oh, no,
Go ahead.
This idea. My God. Okay, look, it is reactionary. It is based in relevancy in terms of recency. And it's all that, right? Nevertheless,
here we go.
Okay. Your points about Greg Gard, his ability to adjust, the way his coaching has evolved, the way the program has evolved is all legitimate. It's all there. The problem is, and we talked about this last week, is that no matter what happens in college basketball, you get measured and you get judged based on your performance in the tournament. A lot of people are supportive of Greg Gard, and I am too. But okay, there comes a point when you are supposed to win these games, and this is not the first of a significant upset in the first weekend, I'll call it that, of the NCAA tournament, where Wisconsin has not been able to get through, where certain flaws are exposed. Here's my flaw for this team this year. they've played well. I mean, again, 6 losses in the Big Ten. That's fantastic. I have no issue with that. But what we've seen in certain instances is that the team could never match the energy of another team if that other team came onto the floor and just took them, right? Just took it out. And we saw that against a 12-seeded High Point team. Now, I get all the thing about High Point being never picked to lose through the regular season. The anger of the mid-majors not being able to play, that you can only get in there if you win your tournament, and everything that they bring in there is fine. But Wisconsin, when they had to meet energy for energy, they weren't able to do it, and they weren't able to do it against High Point.
It's the issue, Charlie, of the fact that I think defensively in that game, in transition, High Point was able to get out in transition,
all the time.
outlet, and get to the hoop without that's an overstatement, with not much contesting going on defensively. When they were forced into an offensive set, Wisconsin did much better. But in transition, this team, to your point, Dan, didn't seem to have the speed and energy to match what they were offering in the midst of the entirety of that game.
No, and it was really frustrating towards the end of that game because High Point did start giving up a little pressure when it came to transition. You saw Nick Boyd go to that left-handed layup time and time again in that last kind of 5 minutes of that game. And then you would just see on the other end, Wisconsin being tired, like you're talking about, and still not playing transition defense. So you would get 2 points on offense and then give up 3 points on the other end of the court. It just felt like over and over again. And that was, I guess, it felt like going into this tournament like it was not going to be the case. Like this Badgers team at points this season against Illinois, against Michigan, showed that they can be tenacious defenders out there and can have that energy and play with this type of discipline if they have the right game plan or have the right energy going into these games. And it felt like at halftime, because the game was so close at that point, that this team lost a little bit of that tenacity in that second half. And it just felt like they were willing to give up a lot of these points in order to do what they do best, which is score the ball. But when you're going up against another team that's doing that more proficiently than you are at that moment, that becomes a problem.
I mean, when you look at the stat sheet across the board, the stats would tell you, if you took the score away, that the Badgers would come out ahead. They shot 50% in the second half. They shot 47% for the game. They were out-rebounded by High Point by 3, but we'll call it statistically the margin of error. All right. But everything statistically should be in favor of the Badgers going out of game 1 with a win and not a loss. But Dan, for me, the most frustrating part once again is inbounding the basketball at critical times. And so here we are again. You got a 1-point lead. We go to inbound. Turnover after a review. We saw it happen against Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. It was either the USC or the UCLA game a couple of months ago where a similar situation occurred. And I don't know if what they do is so predictable that everybody knows coming off of a timeout, here is how the Badgers inbound the ball. Here's how you defend it, because time and time again throughout the season, it just seems coming out of a timeout, they struggle to get the ball in play. Turnovers occur, and we've seen it happen time and time again. I gave a couple of examples where you go to replay, and sure enough, it's either Blackwell or whoever else is the last one to touch the basketball. Turnover. In this case, High Point basketball, they score, and from there, we never get it back.
Well, at High Point basketball, part of their game is causing turnovers. That was said at the very beginning of the game. And if you look at the total turnovers, Wisconsin had 9 turnovers against them. It's just steals. It's not even close. High Point had 6, Wisconsin had 2, but it felt like High Point always had their hands on the ball, and Wisconsin was not able to get used to that. Okay. Well, go ahead.
And it's not even just the steals. They out-rebounded offensively against the Badgers too. They were just, again, willing to find the ball and willing to be aggressive towards the ball in a way that the Badgers just didn't feel like they were ready for in this game.
Yeah, and you saw that, and I agree with you, because you would see sometimes there would be an opportunity for a contested rebound, and one of our bigs would watch them go up and come down with it. I'm like, what are you doing? Now, sometimes rebounds are weird, right? you take a lot of 3-point shots, you're going to get a lot of long rebounds, and you just don't win that game. And that's fine. But there are other times where there were too much flat feet, especially in the second half, where, okay, this is a real game. This is where you get floor burns. This is where you're diving. And you just didn't see that as often, I thought, as was required.
It almost felt in two different ways. One, High Point reminded me a bit of Marquette, when he's got the whiteboard with deflections, Shaka's big on deflections. That was kind of High Point's game, right? Not necessarily, 6 steals, granted, that's a nice line to have. But to Charlie's point, it also was about just getting the hand on the basketball, just being disruptive. And I don't know if the Badgers figured out how to combat that, but the Badgers, to me, also fell into a situation much like we saw Duke, much like we saw North Carolina, much like we saw Kentucky, that I think walked into a game and thought, oh, High Point, what is that, a Montessori school? We got this. What's the difference, right? What's the difference? We'll play our game, we'll be fine. And then all of a sudden you get to halftime and it's closer. The energy is greater on the other side of the floor. And suddenly you start to question yourself and you're like, we're in for a fight that I don't know necessarily mentally, Daniel, if they were prepared for, if that makes sense. Because I think physically, I think schematically, I think the Badgers at any given moment is a better team than what High Point can put on the floor. And I don't want to hear, coach talking about mid-majors and all of that other mess, because we cover mid-majors here in our state. And we love our UWM and UW Green Bay teams because we know what kind of basketball they play. So I deal with that one later. But I just think that the Badgers walked into this game after how they played against Illinois and Michigan, even losing to Michigan, though, in the Big Ten tournament, but how they played, I just think they had this superiority complex against, we're playing High Point. Okay, all right, let's go. Let's get this one over with and see what happens then once we win. We're going into Saturday and who our opponent's going to be.
You said something, being the better team when it matters, right? And that has been the curse, I guess I would call it, of this team, this program, when they get into the tournament, has been being the better team when it matters. But I think it's almost a bit of it's a little confusing, because here's why. If you listen to the post game right after Wisconsin lost that game, Rose was on there talking about Wisconsin, and he said he started, and I wish I would have had this clip ready for you, Charlie. I just forgot to do it. He started to say Wisconsin is a really good basketball, and he stopped and he said the Big Ten is a really good basketball program, and Wisconsin is in that, something like that.
Okay.
And that's where Wisconsin is right now. Wisconsin has proven for the last few years in the tournament that their status as a basketball program is inflated by the idea of being in the Big Ten. Okay, that they kind of get uplifted a little bit because they cannot win these games in the tournament. And that's what Rose was saying, or he kind of corrected himself as saying, because he would not call Wisconsin kind of a solid national program. He wouldn't do it.
Is it inflated because they're in the Big Ten, or is it that the style in the Big Ten is different? Just like we have styles when we talk about football, right? The SEC, the Big Ten. There's a different style. I look at the Big Ten as still, I'll hate to use this term, but more old school. We still have the big guys on the block. We don't play positionless basketball, maybe like we see in some other conferences. And I think when you're used to, Charlie, jump in, when you're used to a certain style of play, when that style is different, I think that to me is what poses the difference. I don't know necessarily if the Big Ten as a whole or any of its members then become inflated. I just think it's a style that if you don't adapt, because that's what we hear about, you've got to have a survive type mentality because the styles are always so different. So to me, I don't know if the program is inflated or if it's the style. Go ahead, fire away.
I don't know, I guess, in my mind, if it's really either that results immediately in the Badgers being overrated or anything like that. I think truly the Badgers get beat down in the Big Ten. I think a lot of these teams get beat down in the Big Ten. You're playing 12 teams at least that are all competitive in nature and that all have tournament type teams that could potentially make that bid. And I think that the Badgers, when you get to a tournament like this, when you have beaten Illinois twice, when you've gone up against Michigan once and probably should have beat there twice and should have beat them twice potentially, I think both those things kind of tire you out getting into this. And when you have Nolan Winter coming back off this injury, coming off the bench in a situation like this game where you kind of needed him to be in that starting lineup. And I know Bielauskas played really well throughout the Big Ten tournament and into the March Madness. But at the same time, you need Nolan Winter on the court. You need all of these guys, especially when you have a John Blackwell or a Nick Boyd who have been playing as hard as they have been. And you, in my mind, need to, I guess, find ways to keep your longevity going, like teams like Duke do, like some of these other squads do, in order to be ready for this March Madness type run.
If a Wisconsin Badger team is not somehow inflated as a result of their status in the Big Ten, okay, if that's not the case, right, then why can't they win a game in the tournament? Okay, why can't they do that? We've been going through this. It's just this rinse and repeat issue.
Okay,
right?
So is North Carolina this year, were they inflated
by being in the ACC?
By being in the ACC. Or are they inflated just because they're quote unquote a blue blood, right?
Yeah. I think North Carolina has got I've got another question, but I won't go off on that right now.
We got them riled up, Charlie.
It's North Carolina is always going to be a little inflated the way Notre Dame is going to be inflated in football, the way Miami is going to be inflated in football. And yeah, I know they got to the national championship game, but for the previous years, they were always the Miami Hurricanes and stuff like that. So I don't think that's quite an apples to apples comparison when we're talking. No one is going to confuse the Wisconsin Badgers as a program and the success or failures of a program the same way they're going to compare them to North Carolina. If you ask in totality which program is the better, you're going to say North Carolina, right? You're going to do that. So I don't know that I would use that same comparison there. If you were, I'll kind of go in a different direction. Is Virginia inflated as a result of being in the ACC? Right? Are they now? They're moving on.
Yeah.
Right. But do they get? Are they really that good? Okay, or do they get a little bit of a bounce because they're in there? Because how would Virginia compete in the Big Ten, for example? I think they'd be very Wisconsin-like.
Okay, but then that's giving credibility to the Big Ten.
Right. Yeah.
Which then to me says if I've got a 24-win team in the Big Ten,
yeah,
my team isn't inflated. I've got a good team.
Mm-hmm. But you don't have a tournament team.
Not as of lately.
Last few years.
Not right? As of lately.
See, and that's where I go. Like, in terms of style of play too, when you look at the Big Ten, okay, the Big Ten has a different style of play. Yeah, I think it used to significantly. I think it's blended a lot more than maybe we're given a credit for. But yeah, it's working for Michigan. It's Michigan's number one seed. They're doing well. Purdue is right back there again. I'm not saying they're winning the whole thing, but they're doing well. But those programs are where they are because of their programs, right? People recognize them irregardless of what conference they're in.
And it's again, hearkening back to this whole idea that what then does the regular season mean if you exit in week one of the national tournament? So then do we trade some of those wins in for losses to bank whatever to get a win or two in the national tournament? This becomes the difficulty when you have a one and done scenario, right? You have a bad day. You have a bad moment, whatever the case may be. Hello, Santa Clara against Kentucky, who's winning the game. And by the way, that kid didn't call bank. He didn't call glass when he hit it at the buzzer. And I should be at Pato right now cashing my ticket in because he didn't call bank.
At the end of the day, guys, in all honesty, this is all my fault.
What did you do, Dan?
I did it again. I gave into hope. Every year.
You do.
Every year I gave into hope. And the return on investment of being a sports fan is almost always sucks. It just very, very rarely does it get the return. You get the return you want.
Right.
And this year I got sucked in. I thought, yep, this could be I never thought they were going to win a national championship.
But Dan, how could you not? I mean, even going into
because I'm 57 and I know better. I know better. I'm a Wisconsin sports fan. I don't mean the UW sense of it. I mean the state. And I almost always lose. I know better.
But when you think about going into the tournament, even the national media, outside of what we do on a weekly basis in talking and following our beloved sports, right? But the national media just celebrating the backcourt of the Wisconsin Badgers, that this could be one of the best backcourts in all of college basketball. And then what does the discussion go to? What do you need in the tournament? Oh, you need a solid backcourt in order to advance and move on. And we were being sold that. Again,
I bought it.
I did too.
I bought it.
Listen,
I knew better. I bought it.
Somewhere the ticket is ripped up. I bought it at Pato. I bought the ticket. Heck yes, we bought the ticket. All right, let's get to a break. We'll continue our discussion with the Wisconsin Badgers and the tournament as a whole. Don't forget, 9:40, the money train rolls in here in this opening hour. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Little Belle Biv DeVoe and New Edition woven in there, as they'll be at Fiserv down in southeastern Wisconsin tonight, getting ready for that show. Looking forward to it, as they'll be joined by Boys to Men and Tony Braxton. And I know I'm going to get slapped in the back of the head when Tony Braxton walks out onto the stage. It's just going to be yeah, look at that. Anyway, let's get back to talking about.
Can you mark that?
Let's get back to talking about our Wisconsin Badgers. And guys, I think one of the things that many are talking about, at least, is where this particular loss ranks as far as things that hurt, that sting, and we've had to deal with it now quite frequently here with this Badger team, as we were talking about in the first segment. And with recency bias, yes, this one hurts, I think, as much as some of the others, but I'll go back a couple of years. To me, the one that still is the kick in the solar plexus is when the Badgers played at Fiserv and lost to Iowa State. Johnny Davis on that team, I think that was one of those groups that you thought could make a bit of a run, and yet Iowa State comes into, in essence, right, the home state. You got the draw you were hoping for, which was to play at Fiserv that year, and then lose to Iowa State in the fashion that they did. Johnny Davis then opts to go into the draft,
right?
And what could have been never was. And I guess that's why these sting so much, is because we thought about what could have been with this particular unit, and then losing to High Point. So of the last few years, you've had the James Madisons of the world that you've lost to. Which one in your mind, Dan, kind of ranks as the worst?
Ooh. Wow.
That's good radio right there, boy.
I'll tell you what. Okay, we'll go back to your clip in just a second. I honestly, I'm pausing because it sounds so. The answer's cheap, but for me, this High Point loss right now is really much the floor. Of this thing, because to your point from earlier in the last segment, you've got a team that has a kind of an organically, authentically celebrated backcourt for being so strong. You had gone into the portal to kind of re-strengthen kind of your front court a little bit. You had your guy from injury come back. You had these things, and I will go back to, again, that one of the issues that I had is this team lost because it could not match energy for energy going up against High Point. And yeah, I get it. High Point made some lucky shots, and there were elements to that. But and I get the 5-12 curse. I get that too. Yeah. Okay. But this is a Wisconsin team that I believe was set up to make a run at a Sweet 16, a legitimate run in a Sweet 16. Granted, they would have had to get past Arkansas. I'm not saying that would have been easy. But to lose this game, and really the way they lost, they didn't get blown out. They lose by a point, but so what?
Yeah.
Right. And the way you could see it at the end, you could see them sliding down that cliff. They're just holding on by their fingernails, but you could kind of get a sense of how it was going to end.
I don't think, Dan, it was a cheap pick, so to speak, of the recent losses, because of everything that you just said. You had an injury, right? That suddenly Nolan Winter, now we saved him through the Big Ten tournament, was healthy, was going to get back into the lineup. It forced the Raps and the big Lithuanians of the world in the middle to enhance their game in tournament play, which they did in the Big Ten tournament. So you watched them ascend. You get Nolan Winter back. You've got your 2 point guards. I call them point guards. I know Nick Boyd is the true point, and Blackwell being the off shooting guard, but you had 2 guards that really were dynamic all year. So to your point, everything was kind of coming together and pointing in the right direction. So I don't think at all it's a cheap out, maybe just because of the recency bias, because there were a lot of factors in play that made this team appear to be one that would be playing today and beyond today into next weekend. Now, what happens after that, I think we all kind of would have called this season, as far as the tournament goes, a success had they just gotten to the Sweet 16, which then again makes the loss that much more painful. Charlie, how about you?
When looking at this team this year, and kind of to both your points, this team felt different. It felt like a team that could make some kind of run with the way Nick Boyd and John Blackwell just were playing so well off of each other. The way that John Blackwell started the season as kind of that number one option, then Nick Boyd took over in the second half of the season. Then you could see them just trade it back and forth when it came to the Big Ten tournament. Those last couple games of the year, it felt like they had the juice and the depth enough to be able to make some kind of run. I don't, in my mind, or I guess in your guys' mind, does it make it feel any better that both like this year and then James Madison in 2024, both those were games where a lot of people were picking that type of upset, and we're saying that these teams, these 12 seeds, could be the ones to kind of knock off the Badgers, versus a game where the Badgers truly are that like overall heavy favorite, where everybody's just saying that's a lock, that's a team to go for, versus, you know, this is a team to watch to be upset at points too.
Go ahead.
I'm getting tired of Wisconsin being picked as the upset. That's the part that's getting exhausting for me is look, even last year when they were a 3 seed going up against BYU, there were a lot of people picking BYU to kind of come in and take that out. And the James Madison, the same thing, you know, and in basketball, you always talk about the matchups and how certain teams match up well against other teams. And you can make the argument that High Point, James Madison, BYU, stuff like that had the good matchups. But then what, if you're a Wisconsin fan, then what good is the seeding, right? It's just what if you are independently selected by computers and AI and a committee that you should be a 3 or a 5 or a 4, whatever it's going to be, and you still can't get through that team that's a 12, an 11, a 13, you know, whatever, then, oh, come on. You know, it's so that's the part that's getting to me.
Isn't that the reason, I guess, they keep the Badgers as a 5 seed despite the run that they made in the Big Ten tournament and not moving up to like a 4 or 3? Isn't that because they think that this type of game can happen to a Badgers team?
It's not unreasonable.
It's funny, though, to think about a few weeks back, we were like, okay, let's just get off that 8-9 seed. Right. We don't want to be in that 8-9 game because
2 months ago was get in the tournament.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But then it was that 8-9 seed. And like, oh man, if we're in that seed, then you've got to play potentially the number 1 seed in the second game, and what a disaster that might be. And then they climb to that 7 spot and then to the 6 spot, and you're like, okay, a little breathing room. We're feeling a little bit better. But then here we go once again in that number 5 seed. We've been a 3 seed, a 5 seed, and a 8 or a 9. I think the year they beat Carolina and then lost in the second round.
That was a 9.
That was a 9 seed. So I think the committee has favorably ranked this team. But again, what difference does it make when we can't seem to get out of our own way in that opening game, in that first round? And that's where the frustration comes to. Look down the stretch. Look down the stretch in that game against High Point where Nick Boyd makes his way to the basket, but misses the layup. Again, the turnover off the inbound. There's little nuances that occur in a tournament game that can absolutely flip the game on its head. Kentucky, Santa Clara, but I'll get off of that. But again, it's little things in a one and done type situation. And that's what I think draws the vast majority of the common college basketball fan to March, is because now it's not as if the Badgers had a day, figure out what their adjustments are. If we're talking, let's say the NBA, get back on the floor today in a best out of 3 or whatever the case may be. You've got to adjust on the fly. You've got to be prepped to match the energy on the fly. You've got to be mentally ready to roll once that tip goes up. It's just what makes the national tournament the national tournament.
Absolutely right. Games like this, yes,
yeah,
that's what makes it so special. Why a lot of people watch. I don't think it's the number 1 seeds that people get excited about, especially in the first week of the national tournament. It's games like this.
Yes,
I'm just tired of Wisconsin losing games this. You know, but what's yours? What's your more devastating loss in these lists of devastating losses?
I go back. Where you started this conversation, and to me it's the Iowa State one. It's what happened at Fiserv, where it was filled with red, right? It was filled with Badger fans, and it was the home draw. I'll call it that way. I mean, the only better draw you could have had is if the Kohl Center hosted the opening round and they put the Badgers and left them at home for whatever reason. They had to travel 60 miles, and that was it. Now, granted, Iowa State over the years has done a great job of recruiting from this area. You got a lot of Wisconsin and Milwaukee kids who end up on that Iowa State team. So, they had a bit of a home following there as well. But yeah, that Fiserv loss with a Johnny Davis led crew that to me was a team that I thought at least was going to go to the Sweet 16, and maybe even a little bit more the way that thing was comprised back in the day. But these losses get a little bit old, and the losses get old, Daniel, I'll say it this way, just because of how the season played out. UWM struggled this year, but their struggles were because of injuries. UW Green Bay, credit Doug Gottlieb. He took a team that was heavenly awful, last season, and flipped it over and gave them an opportunity. They were a storyline. Marquette, we're trying to figure out where Shaka wants to go with this thing. Does he stay true and not use the portal, or now is he going to dabble into portal to kind of help reinforce some of that foundation that he set there? But we all had our eyes on the Badgers because we had our other three teams that were struggling. And so now let's put our emphasis on the Wisconsin Badgers. And they dropped the ball.
Yeah, and I know we're coming up against a break, but part of the frustrating for me to kind of maybe bring this to a close is just now we got to recreate our team. We got to rebuild the team, and every other team has to do the same thing. But you used to be able to look, even in 2014 when they made the semis, it's like you could look at that core group and say they're coming back.
Who's coming back?
Yeah,
right?
And you could look at, and now we're starting all over from scratch. You got to re-recruit your own guys, and then you got to refill it again. And it's, that's the part where it's even a little bit more exhausting to be a college sports fan, because you run into this all the time.
But Dan, it then gives us something to talk about each and every Saturday.
Yeah, maybe
from 9
maybe
to 11,
start
right here.
Talking about some wins
on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network. It's College Sports Weekly, as I said, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by Potawatomi Sportsbook. Money Train is next. All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook, as we go to the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line and bring in the money train, who has been red hot. Kid, you went 4 for 4 last week. TA, welcome in. Good morning.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. First and foremost, Dan, you've been missing Fridays for the last couple weeks. I want to get that out there. I mean, we need to get it back going. All right.
It's I'll talk to my employers about that, see if they can give me a little extra time at the end of the day. It's yeah, I'm sorry about that, TA.
I think we could work it in as an excursion, an employee-led excursion.
Well,
how about that?
Working with a distillery now, it's it could be a sales meeting.
Thank you. All right,
yeah,
there we go. All right,
spin it that way.
Way to go, T.
Listening, okay.
Way to go. All right, sir. Let's start with pick number 1.
All right, I got 2 for today and 2 for tomorrow.
Okay.
Right.
First game out is Louisville and Michigan State. There's 2 things about March Madness. Never take Greg Gard as a 5 seed and never go against Tom Izzo in March. Take Michigan State minus 4.5.
All right, so Michigan State minus 4.5. Pick number 2, my friend.
All right, TCU and Duke. All right, I like Duke to win, but I don't think they're going to cover the 11.5.
Ooh.
I mean, not only because of the game against Siena, I just think that they're playing a little down right now with all the injuries. I would take TCU plus the 11.5 today.
Isn't that amazing? Duke almost lost to a crayon, but I'm bummed. I'll be here all night, ladies and gentlemen. Pick number 3.
All right. Don, you know, we have a friend that his daughter goes to Kentucky and his best friend is the coach of Iowa State. I'm going to settle this bet for him.
Okay.
He's going to be tiptoeing at home tomorrow. All right. Joshua Jefferson went out, about 3 minutes into the game. He's a game time decision. Don't know. But Iowa State only given 5.5 to Kentucky. Go Cyclones. Take Iowa State minus the 5.5.
Okay. Iowa State favored by 5.5. And then, as always, we get the bonus pick, my friend.
Okay. The matchup I'm looking forward to next week. See, I'm already looking ahead. St. John's and Kansas.
Ooh.
I would love to see a Rick Pitino, Tom Izzo matchup next week. I am going with the St. John's over Kansas minus 3.5.
St. John's minus 3.5. So let's recap. Michigan State minus 4.5. That played or will be played today, TCU getting an 11.5. We like them. And then tomorrow it's Iowa State minus 5.5 and St. John's minus 3.5. You're on fire, right, sir. Let's keep this thing burning. Let's go. Right. Thanks for joining us, my friend.
I love talking to you. I love this time of the year.
All right. So that's TA joining us, the money train on the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line. Charlie, how about we get to some headlines here before the top of the hour? It's the headlines. All right, Dan. So we sit in the midst of March Madness, our favorite time of the year. But for headlines, I want to touch on something that happened in Division III, in the women's side of things. We'll get into Oshkosh a little bit later in hour number 2. Unfortunately, they fell in the Final Four. But we had a major upset happen on the other side of the bracket, as Scranton was taking on NYU. Insert the office jokes there, as we were doing prior to coming on the air. But why is it a storyline? NYU going into that game had won 91 in a row. They were looking for a 3rd straight national championship. They were looking to do so in undefeated fashion. They would have been the only college program to win 3 in a row, undefeated in all 3 seasons. But they fell to Scranton. The odds went against them, and that became a storyline because, quite frankly, if you're watching the four-letter network when it comes to SportsCenter and some of the other programs, NYU was getting a little bit of publicity because of what they had been doing here over the past 2+ now seasons, but fell in the Final Four. So we get Denison and Scranton now to go head-to-head later today for the national championship.
Yeah, Denison Scranton sounds like a law firm, doesn't it?
Does it? It
just
does.
A little bit.
It's so fun, though, with these Division III schools that you don't necessarily have reference to at any other time of the year except for right now. Yes, the law firm of Scranton and Denison.
I was surprised to hear that they had lost. I had a kind of just anointed New York as the D3 championship for the women. And I don't think I'd still take that bet 9 times out of 10 to do that. But that is one of those brutal elements. We've been talking all morning about what the tournament does to you. And this is what the tournament does, especially I think when you are an overwhelming favorite and then all of a sudden there's a team that's sticking with you. It gets that momentum, gets that belief that anything could happen. Obviously if, they're to that point, Scranton was a good team.
Right.
But I don't think anybody expected that ultimate victory by them.
But Charlie, here's the difference to what Dan was speaking to before we finished up the last segment, which is now we look at the Badgers, they got to rebuild everything, right? We're going to see how they rebuild their roster. At the Division III level, you don't necessarily go through that. You might get one or two that kind of, find their way in, let's say as juniors or seniors, but you can pretty much look at the roster and know who's returning based on the success they had this year, what the next couple of years are going to be like. And I'll insert Wisconsin Lutheran College, what Clay Kneppel has done over there.
Yeah.
They getting again into the tournament by winning the NAC, but they had a ton of freshmen who got unbelievable minutes this year as starters. And now you're looking at that crew coming back for their sophomore, junior, senior years. Is there still stuff to be done? I'm sure Coach Kneppel would definitely get on the phone right now and say, oh yeah, now we got to deal with complacency and making sure there, there's a ton of things, but you get an opportunity to look at that roster and go, oh my goodness, look what's coming back and look what we can do now for the next several years.
Well, and I think sometimes at the Division III level, in my personal experience, you're looking at coaches hitting the transfer portal more often than some of these players are hitting the transfer portal. And I think that changes things a little bit, especially for some of these teams that are getting this rise, or a team like NYU who is on this kind of streak where you can lose some of the coaching staff and that can change how things go. You can lose some of those star players still, especially as it leaks down further through the NCAA.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think at the Division III level, as Charlie said, we're losing more coaching tenure than we're actually losing it from the player side. All right, hour number 1 already in the books. As we get ready for hour number 2, we're going to be joined by Alex Dahlman, the representative of the 39th District, who authored the NIL bill that was passed this week. So we'll talk to the representative on the other side of the break. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by Potawatomi Sportsbook.
basketball, football, baseball. From Division 1 to Division 3, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Dom Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
All right, welcome back in. Hour number 2. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, and we're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can join in on the conversation on the Nicolay Law talk and text line 414-677-1250, and follow us on all our socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio. As we kick off hour number 2, we're going to jump to the Nicolay Law talk and text line as we are honored this morning to bring in the representative of the 39th Assembly District here in Wisconsin. It's Representative Alex Dahlman. Good morning, sir. Thanks for taking some time to join us on a Saturday.
Good morning. Happy to be on.
Yeah, the Wisconsin sweatshirt rocking there.
Absolutely.
There you go. Okay.
Probably should have apologized first, not warning him about the Andy Williams. He had to wonder what was going on.
It was sports, though, and suddenly we got Christmas music on a Saturday. But for us, sir, it is the most wonderful time of the year as we sit in March Madness, even though our beloved Badgers took it on the chin on Thursday. But we're still going to celebrate the fact that we are in March Madness. And this week, you had the opportunity, I guess, to celebrate a little bit as well, as you authored a bill that got passed in the state assembly. So why don't you, for our listeners, first and foremost, just tell us the essence of what this bill is and how you came about being the one who wanted to originate it and get it there for a vote?
Absolutely. As we know, ever since 2021, NIL has taken over our college sports. Different states have tried to do different things to try to keep up with a changing landscape. Some describe as a Wild West landscape of college sports. Now there was another settlement that happened last spring where it's called the House settlement, where now athletes from back in 2016, all the way dating back to 2016, have to get paid or have the ability to have revenue shared with them from these athletic programs. So we've seen a rise of legislation from across the country jump up on this as athletic departments are just trying to keep up with the changing landscape. So I've always been a huge proponent of college athletics, UW-Madison Badger fan, and I know there's many of our colleagues in the Capitol that know that. But I'm also one of the most outspoken critics of UW-Madison when it comes to academics and how we spend our money there. So I was approached on trying to bridge that gap of how we can best explain this inside the Capitol, that this is a great thing. This would be a great move for not only protecting our student athletes' privacy rights, but it also protects our competitive advantage that we might have here in the state of Wisconsin with our universities, while at the same time allowing them to have a little bit of breathing room to actually be competitive again, especially when it comes to the big sports that bring in all of our revenue, such as football and basketball. So we ushered that through, had a 95-1 vote in the state assembly. And then went through the Senate last week on a much smaller margin, 17-16. But it's on its way to the governor's desk right now.
Go ahead.
So one question I have right off the bat, and I've got just a lot of clarity questions. So those are going to come down the pike a little bit, but why was there such a difference in the vote between the Assembly and the Senate? And maybe you have that answer. Maybe and it didn't look like it was purely down political lines, but why was there such a significant difference between those two bodies?
I just think I'm in my third term, so this is starting my sixth year in the state assembly, and I've just realized that the dynamics of the Senate and the Assembly are totally different, and people have the ability to have a little bit more power in the Senate because there's just less people. So sure. I think we coalesced around a good idea here in the state assembly, and again had 95-1. But once you get into the Senate, there might have been some different senators that had different ideas on putting the two together. We were able in the assembly, I believe, to differentiate the athletic program from the academic side of UW-Madison, where we kind of have some contentious debates because they truly are separate. They are separate pots of money, separate funding. The senators, I believe, probably had a little bit of a different approach of let's hold UW accountable on everything altogether. But then again, as you mentioned, it was a completely bipartisan vote. It did not go down party lines. It was Democrats and Republicans that ultimately came through to pass this bill through.
So as the bill makes its way now to the governor's desk, and we can follow up on that one in just a minute, but the essence of the bill, as far as the allocation of money that will now go to the university's athletic program, talk a little bit about what it is meant to do, why the state decided to get involved. You laid some of that out already as far as getting the competitive balance back in, but now this money that's going to be allocated, there's some specificity to that as far as what the university can use it for, and then what they will then be able to do with that money now entering, we'll say, the accounting books, freeing up some other money to do what they need to do. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I wanted to make this really clear too, because this is something that's kind of been lost in the wash too. And I think during conversations, maybe this is why the vote in the Senate was a little bit different too. But the reason I ran this bill is because I did not want any taxpayer dollars going directly into the pockets of college athletes. I think that should be coming straight from our athletic department. So ultimately, we decided to put some money into already existing athletic facilities that currently have debt service. So right now in the state of Wisconsin, 60% of athletic buildings get paid for by the general taxpayer of the state of Wisconsin. 40% get paid for through program revenue that's raised through ticket sales, concession sales, donations from private people. We just wanted to say, since this is such an economic powerhouse for our state, we create so much tax revenue from having a competitive athletic climate that we wanted to be able to put a little bit more money in. So we're going above that 60%, offsetting some of those debt service costs, and then which allows more of that program revenue, those private donations, to be used for NIL contracting with students.
I'm curious. So if I had, and I might be, feel free to correct me on this one. It sounds to me like right now, of the 50 states that are out there, we now have, including Wisconsin, 33 states that have some type of NIL related laws that are on the books to support, supplement, pick your own word. Did you look at some of those other laws and trying to form those together, look at what other states are doing, and maybe what is a significant difference from this compared to some other states? Is this completely unique compared to what other states are doing, or is it in line what they're doing?
Great question. I believe it's right in line. So the beauty of America is we have a lot of different melting pots of legislatures trying to do different things across the country. Right away when the settlement came down last spring, and even back dating to 2021, states have tried to get in the forefront of this. So states have tackled things just like the open records and things, and some have tackled just the employment issue of are these student athletes employees. So we were able to, in the long run, I think it might have hurt our program by waiting too long. But over the years, we've been able to see what have been successful in other states, what has gone through the scrutiny, and then being able to pile that all together. So what we're doing here in the state of Wisconsin is not out of line with what other states are doing. We've kind of compiled the best of what other states have done and left out the worst. But again, we're still technically behind, and I'm not advocating for any of the things that other states are now doing. But states like Arkansas are now passing no income tax on NIL revenue or NIL income for these college student athletes, just to be able to draw student athletes into their state. So we're just getting in on the bottom floor here too. And again, I'm not advocating for anything further than that right now. I would like to see how this plays out, but other states are going way further because they understand how much money this generates for their state.
We're talking with Representative Alex Dahlman, who represents the 39th Assembly District, sitting there right now in the state capitol in Madison, and author of this NIL bill that passed the Senate and now sits to be signed by the governor. Your inclination as we sit right now, do you think the governor will go ahead and sign off on the legislation that you're passing his way to put this thing into law officially?
Yes, I do. One of the main things we had to, and some will say this bill was fast-tracked. It moved pretty quickly through the legislative process, but again, it got a lot of media attention. This is one of the many interviews that I've done to make sure the public understands exactly what this bill does. It had all the public hearings it needed. It went through both houses. But one of the main things we wanted to get done, and the reason why it's moving so fast, is because the governor did provide his sign off on it. There might be a couple tweaks that he might make through a veto. Not quite sure, but ultimately the essence of the bill and the reason why it's passed is in moving so fast because the governor has approved it.
I'm curious about kind of general public opinion. You said it's made its way through all the committees that it needs to go through, and there has been dialogue. You've had different interviews on it, but we're not hearing the angst about this. At least I haven't heard the angst about this bill compared to something where you might see public support, public funding of a stadium or something like that. But there's a lot of confusion about, what NIL is and isn't, and should student athletes even be paid, that kind of a thing. Why do you think, I guess I'm adding a little bias to the question, so I apologize, but it doesn't feel like it has had that same amount of public angst that other publicly supported referendums or related to sports has had. Why do you think it hasn't been the way, or has it? Have you seen it differently?
Well, I think there's also a couple of senators, goes back to the last question, that might have started blending this too. I know we had a little bit of concern that way of members who had voted against the Brewers Stadium, members who have voted against the Bucs Stadium in the past, kind of putting these two things together. But ultimately, I ultimately voted for the Brewers Stadium, but I'm not a big fan of building stadiums for billionaires that make a bunch of money off the team and in 25 years head on out. But this is not like that. This is not a singular owner of the building. This is a public helped, public financed administration or policy. It's buildings that are going to be here that are already built. We're not building new ones. But again, this is something where I don't believe it's just us handing over a blank check to a billionaire and saying, thank you for being in our state. Please stay longer. This is something that we need to, we're already helping publicly fund, and we should do more.
So you touched on this a few minutes ago, and I guess where I want to see you take it a little bit is the importance of, in this case, since we're talking about college athletics, it's not only the importance of having successful teams within Madison, it's what it means for the state, and what it means for the state as far as tourism and stature and prestige, and what that does then to other communities for bringing in tourism. It has a wide-ranging effect when our teams, whether we're talking Wisconsin, UWM, Marquette, UW Green Bay, when they're successful, what that means as far as the state goes and the economic viability of a number of different facets.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another, again, the main reason I got behind this bill is because we need to have a strong athletic department here in the state of Wisconsin, especially UW-Madison, especially Marquette and Milwaukee. There's a study that was done back in 2022 when we had our last really good winning season here for the football team in Madison, and it said that the state generated $757 million in economic impact just from the athletic program in general, and it also showed that it created $19 million in revenue for the state per home game for the Badgers football team. $19 million. So we're asking the taxpayer to put forward about $14.6 million or $15 million overall for the entire state as an investment to hopefully get a program back that can bring that $19 million back per home game, $700 million back per year for the state, so that we can use that money to make meaningful investments into other areas, possibly public education, possible long-term tax relief for the state of Wisconsin. We want to be able to make sure that that's bolstered. When we go back to just the football program alone at UW-Madison, that brings in 80% of all the revenue for the athletic program at UW. I mean, if you don't have a competitive football program, they're going to have to cut. They're going to have to cut programs that aren't bringing in revenue. They're going to have to cut their Olympic programs. They're going to have to cut women's sports. They're going to have to cut things, hopefully not, but like things like hockey, which have been super successful, but just ultimately don't bring in the funds that are needed to sustain everything. So all of these sports trickle down through all the athletes coming to our state that go to our school to play sports, all the all the TV revenue, everything that all goes away. And it's a huge impact on the state of Wisconsin.
How much impact do you think it had when Chris McIntosh kind of walked right up to that line and he didn't say cutting sports, but he said everything is on the table. How much impact do you think that had ultimately on the vote?
I think that has a huge impact. I mean, again, we are competitive. We put 23. I think we have 23 championship athletic programs here in the state of Wisconsin at UW-Madison, and I believe that there will be. And I don't know. He didn't say it publicly, but personally, I believe that he will have to make, from looking at the finances that they have, he will have to make very tough decisions, and there will be programs that get cut. Just because, again, if you don't have the revenue coming in the football program, when you have tickets for sale for $3 on StubHub leading up to the game, you're not going to bring in the revenue, and you're going to have to make some serious decisions that aren't going to be very popular around the state.
All right, sir, one final question before we let you go, and thank you again for taking some time on a Saturday to join us, because we certainly appreciate it. With all of the things that are happening around the country at the state level and this idea where programs may be cut, is it going to take a Wisconsin, in Arkansas, Illinois, whatever the university is, to start cutting programs before maybe we see some national legislation which tries to wrap its arms around this and kind of curtail, as we talked about earlier, what has become really the wild, wild west?
I do believe that's probably the case. Unfortunately, our federal government doesn't really act very fast. They have to wait for problems to arise before they have any decision or any inkling to make any decision whatsoever. I'm not very happy. I believe this should have been settled more on the federal level because the NCAA covers every single state. So I wish the federal government would act. Right now, we're just trying to protect, again, our student athletes and our programs as much as we can, but ultimately, I believe it's going to start to trickle down through these smaller schools around the country that are unable to compete. They're going to have to make some tough decisions, and ultimately, it's going to be sad if only the big schools and the top athletes get the opportunities that to perform in all of these sports, and the smaller schools aren't able to sustain them.
Representative, thank you so much again for
sir.
your time on this Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we look forward to seeing what the governor does with this bill now that it sits at his desk.
Absolutely, anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Much appreciated. That's Representative Alex Dahlman. He represents the 39th Assembly District, as we were talking about that NIL bill that made its way through not only the House but the Senate, and now sits at the governor's desk waiting for his signature. And according to the representative, may see a few tweaks, but we'll see how that plays out. Dan, Charlie, and I will continue this discussion on the other side of the break. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly. Little new edition, still
I
prepping.
can see the video over here.
I'm prepping for tonight. I'm ready.
Classic.
I am ready as they'll hit the stage tonight if I serve for them. But we sit in the midst again of College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. As always, you can join us on the Nicolay Law Talk and text line 414-677-1250. And I think we all kind of unanimously, he says 5 times fast, after or during the break, want to continue this discussion because the representative said a couple of things I think that piqued our interest.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, Daniel, was the fact that when we talked about the potential of cutting sports, it still seemed, based on his response, that there could still be teams on the chopping block based upon finances. And now what does that do? It opens a whole network of issues with Title IX and recruitment and tuitions, and we can go right down that pipe hole, so to speak. But it was interesting that it was left on the table that this particular bill was not going to eradicate the potential of certain sports being eliminated.
Right. I think, and I'll have to listen to the interview again, but I think it was something along the line, still difficult decisions have to be made.
Yes. Yeah.
At the UW athletic department by the athletic director. I was a little surprised to hear that, but then when you back off a little bit and you realize, going back to the challenges that the football program has had in the last 2 years, and you can begin to forecast a little bit the challenges that's going to put on the athletic department as a whole, because you're not selling football tickets the way you used to.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably predicting it's going to be a lower level this year. I have no data to back that up, but you recognize just how important that football program is, having a successful football program, filling Camp Randall Stadium with more butts and seats. It's probably not unexpected that we're seeing more concerts at Camp Randall.
Absolutely.
Year,
anything now to draw people in.
The station wants to get me to AC/DC, but I'm all for it. But
Dan will be our correspondent live from Camp Randall for that particular
one hell
show.
of an interview. But yeah, I was surprised to hear that. And I think that is because we've been so used to Wisconsin being in the black through its football program that we've grown used to it, grown a little entitled by it. And then I don't think we ever really recognized, and because of NIL, because of all these different things, just how close we were to the edge of not being into the black. We are 5 years, give or take, from having really successful football programs,
mm-hmm.
and I by record, right? And suddenly here we are looking at potentially a conversation about cutting programs.
But that, Charlie, where Dan has gone with it, I think is spot on with the fact that we focus a lot, right, about the wins and losses and the frustrations with the coaching staff and the players and the recruiting and everything else that goes on. But the lack of success on the field now has transcended to butts and seats, which then means ticket sales, which then means the effect of the budget for the entire athletic department, because it's football as the driving revenue generator for all Division I schools, as long as they have football. If you've got football, that's your largest revenue generator that you have. And when you're not successful, now the entire athletic department takes a hit. It's why you get directional schools that will go play a Big Ten, a Pac-12, or whatever conference school that they know they're going to get their what's handed to them, because the check that they get then funds the athletic department for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, it's like a boxer going and kind of taking a fall against a guy that's the world heavyweight championship, despite you not boxing in more than 5 matches. Like, you're going to get paid off of that. And I also, I guess, am a little concerned with it with Wisconsin specifically, because you have such a good volleyball program, the women's hockey team, where they are filling seats for those events. The basketball team, you're filling seats, and it's still not enough for this university in order to kind of supplement what you're losing in football. I guess my question is, like, it kind of feels like the onus is almost put too much on the fact that the football team doesn't have the NIL to compete with an Indiana or even like a Miami, some of these other schools. But at the same time, I look at a school like Miami, who does have a substantial NIL sum there at that school, but they also do a really good job of still recruiting in state. They still know how to keep those Florida guys in Florida. They still know how to find players that maybe kind of those diamond in the rough. And I think you saw it with Indiana and Riley Nowakowski coming from the state of Wisconsin, playing at Wisconsin and kind of getting misused there to the point where he can transition to a school like Indiana. They can find that type of role for him. Those schools, yes, they have these giant NIL pools, but they also still do the smaller things right that I still am frustrated with the University of Wisconsin about. So how much does a bill like this really truly fix what we're seeing in the recruiting, in the coaching on the field?
Well, Dan, I think to answer Charlie's point, I think Charlie makes a great point, is the fact that all of that stuff is interconnected. It's one thing to be successful. It's another thing to how you achieve that success. So it's not just about the money. It's not about the $14.6 million that will be allocated to the university for the upkeep of the athletic facilities or upgrades, that then that money can be used again to go ahead and recruit. But if you're not recruiting the right people,
right.
And I think that's where we've talked about, Greg Gard does a great job in speed recruiting, right? Because you don't have a lot of time. We mentioned it before. You're already in this process now of rebuilding your roster. It's where the football team has lacked, or when they've recruited people, to your point, they've not used them appropriately. And I think if we're going to see this university ascend again, there's going to have to be a philosophical change with the current coach and staff. Otherwise, current coach and staff, I think, is going to be shown the door, because you do need to still, with the money allocated, be able to recruit, be able to scheme, be able to coach. That's what Indiana has done so well. Everybody wants to say, well, they got a couple of sugar daddies, they pump some money into there. Yes, that's a component of it, but don't mistake what that coaching staff has done in turning that program around. And I think that's got to be a point of contention as well in Madison as far as university goes. If we're going to fund, great, here's a few extra bucks, go get some kids. But when you get those kids, how are you utilizing them? What's the scheme you're using? What you can do, the what list all the way down the line for that particular program to once again ascend and get the university back where it needs to be financially.
It's about leadership. The question right now in sports right now is your NIL enough? Is your collective enough? I think there are a lot of programs out there, major D1 programs, their collective is great, but they're not doing what they want to do. And that's leadership. And that's when you look at a Cignetti at Indiana, something like that, where his messaging, his coaching style, his recruiting is all in line first. And then the money kind of follows. Look, if UW football were, and I'm not expecting this, but if they were suddenly to turn around and go 8-4, the money's going to show up. Suddenly the collective is going to get filled again where they'd like to see it. That kind of momentum is going to be built into there, but people have to see evidence, right? Now, what's happening at Indiana football, that is so atypical. That is so at the end to have a 2-year turnaround of Indiana football that results in a national championship, I think skews it a little bit the wrong way. A lot of people looking, okay, we just have to do what Indiana did. Really? Just do what Indiana did, right?
It's so far past that.
Right.
That is such a minimalistic way of looking at it, right? That you just increase the pot of money and boom, we're ready to roll.
Find a good coach. Just find a good coach.
Which again, I'll go back to how we started with Greg Gard being on the hot seat. Well, who else is out there?
That's true.
If you got somebody in the wings, we can have that discussion. But to get rid of someone just to get rid of them, we've seen how many schools struggle that were prominent, whether it's football, basketball, name the sport. They get rid of coach. Let's use, it's not hypothetically, use Syracuse. When they ran Boeheim out, his time maybe had come. Syracuse was, I think, we could declare them a blue blood when it comes to college basketball. Syracuse hasn't been relevant in heaven knows how long since Boeheim has left, and they're still trying to find the right person to come in and resurrect the program. So I guess what I'm doing is supporting what you were just saying, Dan. It goes to leadership. You can dump money in, that's great, but there are so many other elements that go along with the fact that your NIL now has increased to make the team successful.
Yeah, and I'll throw another team in there that is, again, based in Bloomington, Indiana basketball. Okay, they have been known now to kind of increase the NIL that they have. They've been doing kind of all of these things, and what has it gotten them?
Right.
It has not worked out. They are not in the tournament. They are, and another question for a different show. How long do you have to not have to have success in order to lose your blue blood status?
That's a good one.
Because I'm looking at Indiana. Indiana was blue blood for us. We are Gen X. But I'm looking at Charlie. Can Charlie really look at Indiana and say they're blue blood? They haven't been blue blood for 20. Yeah. Sorry, Gen Z. That's when do you? How long do you have to be at the top to be considered blue blood when you weren't?
Right.
It's another question for a different show. But this goes back to picking the right people. It's the people that are going to turn around the program, that generate the love and the support, that are going to generate the interest and the money. And right now, Wisconsin football is kind of up in the air a little bit. People have to decide what they want to do, how they feel about Greg Gard and basketball. But ultimately, where does this bill kind of fit in? It offers some flexibility, but it is not a total answer in terms of what's happening with UW athletics right now.
Well, and then does this put pressure on those coaches? Like, does that change the base level of a hot seat now that these schools, these programs are going to be getting that influx of cash? What does this change for a Luke Fickell in terms of, if they don't succeed this season, how does next season play out? Does he get a next season? Kind of with Greg Gard, too, to some degree. You have to start talking about how much hotter does the seat get when you're getting an extra $8 million?
Oh, and I think we've seen it this past year in football in other universities who we never would see a college coach fired mid-season. That just didn't happen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't happen. You waited until the end. Sometimes you got the pink slip as you were walking off the field, and we all love to joke about that one down in Arkansas with our friend. But you saw a number of coaches now, because of NIL, Charlie, because of the amount being spent, that, the people who are writing those checks, and we've heard these stories before, Dan, the guys who are writing and the women who are writing those 7-figure donation-like checks, they're not necessarily, when they call, they're not calling the switchboard and asking for coach. They got coach's cell number, and they're talking directly to, like, listen, I've given you 7 figures to bring in said recruit. What are you doing? Why is this not working? And now they're having to answer. So I think the hot seat has gotten warmer quicker, if that makes any sense, just because of the amount of money that has been influxed into college athletics legally. We all know it was influxed at a certain point, back in the day, but now it's legally. Here's the other thing that I think needs to be addressed in many ways is, the representative talked about at the national level that it might take, let's just use Wisconsin, since that's our example right now, coming out and saying we're cutting A, B, C, and D. We can't afford it. We're sorry. It's just the way of the landscape right now for then the national perspective to come into play with the federal government, because we rip on the NCAA a lot, and quite honestly, they deserve it. Okay, they do. Dan, we've
don't
talked.
Know what you're talking
we've
about.
talked about how many times the NCAA buries their head in the sand,
the NCAA.
and hope that something will take place without them having to intervene. But if the NCAA goes away, what happens to the Whitewaters and the Oshkoshes and the Lacrosses of the world? What happens to a UW Green Bay or a UWM when that money goes away? I mean, we were talking during the break, NYU, as we said during headlines, their 3-year winning streak has been snapped. They won't play for a Division III national championship. There's legitimate rationale, if the NCAA goes away, that you could have a team like an NYU that they should be in the national tournament, whose athletic department would say, yeah, we can't afford it. We didn't have enough money set aside to send our team to go play in the tournament. So we're going to have to say thanks, but no thanks. That could happen if the NCAA goes away, because through the NCAA and college football and college basketball and the media rights that all come pouring into their their coffers, that gets disseminated all the way down to, again, the Oshkoshes, the La Crosse, the Whitewaters of the world. They're going to suffer as well if we don't start to figure this thing out.
Yeah, and what it really comes down to are the media rights. That's the big dog in the room, because if there were a new version for the Power 5 conferences to have a different governing body for football and basketball, then that changes that's where the money's going to go.
Right.
And the NCAA is fighting for ways to stay relevant through media rights. If they lose that, if they lost 50, 60, well, I'll call it 50% of the teams that get into the NCAA tournament, we all know the billion that they make every year as a result of what happens. If there was a different version, a competitive version of the NCAA, where now, the bulk of those teams that were playing in this tournament are going into it, then it's the other entity that gets that dollar, that dollar amount. And then everything changes. Then, like you said, the trickle effect that goes down into D2, D3, lower level D1 programs are all going to feel that. And suddenly it's even more of a minor league or a minor professional league than they ever had.
And then what we end up seeing, Charlie, is the fact that at the Division III level, again, as we were talking about during the break, they're recruiting athletes to get tuition dollars, which keeps Division III, obviously, any university afloat. You cut athletics because of the NCAA and the examples that Dan just gave. Now you're cutting a significant portion, in some cases 40 to 50% of your enrollment goes away. Those tuition dollars go away, and we're seeing Division III universities close at a rate of, I think it's 8 or 9 a year, the last thing I read, across the country. That could double, if not triple, if we see athletics being dwindled, because, again, those tuition dollars now have dwindled and the university just can't afford to stay open.
Which is really frustrating, because in my experience playing D3 college football in those 4 years, every single year, the most transfers were from these universities closing down and shutting down their programs.
Yes.
But also, a lot of these kids are playing the sport that they love at the D3 level because they love the sport. There's no other reason to play it at that level. So now you're taking all this money that's being made at the D1 level and using that as an excuse to take these sports away from these kids that are playing because they love the sport and not because they're looking to get a check. But then you're pretending like these D3 athletes are the same as the D1 athletes, and that's all they want is a check, when it's just not the same case.
Well, Dan, I think we have a perfect example of that, and I happen to be wearing their pullover today when they cut baseball. I'm not going to throw the university out there. They cut baseball, and I think the administration, in cutting baseball, trying to save a few bucks, thought those kids are going to stay. Right? They're going to stay. No, they're not.
They want to play.
I think we had one kid out of, I don't know what they had, 25 maybe on the team. I think we had one kid who stayed because he had one more semester to go in order to graduate. The other 24 left. Well, that's 24
millions
examples of tuition dollars that walked out the door, which expedited, I think, the process of this particular university have to shuttering its doors. All right, we got to get to a break. It's our last break of the morning, and when we come back, gentlemen, it's time to hand out some shovels, and we'll do it after this. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. One last time, it's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Time for us to hand out some shovels as we wrap up this Saturday in the midst of the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. So, Professor, I'm starting with you, my friend. Go ahead.
Oh my! I've been thinking about this. I will try to end this week of disappointment and heartache on a positive note. I will reach out to Mr. Nick Boyd. Thank you for providing your services. It sounds weird to say for a college athlete. I'm still not there yet, but thank you for allowing us to pay you for 1 year, because you did deliver, Nick. You did deliver. You were a fun person to watch. I thought you represented the red and white well, and you will be a welcomed member back as a Badger alumni. So thank you for playing. Wish you well in the future. But yeah, it's just a tough way to say goodbye to you.
Absolutely. All right, Charlie, go ahead, sir.
I have a clip for mine.
Look at Mr. High Tech over there.
As much as I don't want to, give any hype to High Point University, their student broadcasters were electric at the end of the game. I have this clip from these guys.
That is
he
so
is good. He
Electric.
did a great
That
job.
is so good.
Well done.
And to, how would I say, as a student, mesh your excitement with a little bit of professionalism.
Well, and I talked about this with Sparky yesterday because he loved this clip too. The play-by-play guy has his microphone. He's still talking. He's being professional. His color guy next to him is like on the ground.
Yes.
The microphone's screaming, like just rolling around. He's having the time of his life. It's hilarious, like the dichotomy you have between the two guys.
And I love in some of the post-game press conferences that have happened already, where you've had some of the coaches acknowledge the student reporters that made the trip to whatever part of the country to continue to cover the team. I thought that was really well done. So yeah, nice job in bringing that up. That was awesome. Mine is going to the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh women's basketball team, who unfortunately lost in the Final Four 82-61 against Denison. Again, Denison will play Scranton for the women's national championship a little bit later on. But we had 13 teams this year, guys, that made it to the tournament at the Division III level. And when all was said and done, UW Oshkosh was the last one standing. They made it to the Final Four again. Unfortunately, Denison got out to a really strong start in that Final Four matchup, and Oshkosh was never able to really rebound, no pun intended, from the deficit, and then ended up losing 82-61. But congratulations to the Titans, who again made it to the Final Four and represented our state well, along with the other 12 teams that made up that 13-team postseason roster. I'll say it that way, from our state. It goes again, Dan, to how good Division III athletics is in the borders of the state of Wisconsin.
Within the borders of the state of Wisconsin, it continues to maintain its legacy of basketball and really athletics as a whole.
Yes,
because you can look at baseball, the success that Whitewater's having. You can certainly look at football and see what's happened over there. But a lot of other sports do very, very well within the confines of national prominence.
Yeah.
And that's just a wonderful kind of narrative to what they're able to do on budgets that aren't, hundreds of millions of dollars. They do a well job. They do,
and
a
that's
good job.
The beauty of it is the fact that you get a Whitewater in Oshkosh, a lacrosse that does well, and it bleeds throughout the athletic department, Charlie, in which now we see all of these other sports get elevated, playing well, and getting some national recognition and some prominence. And then it goes back to recruiting, the dollars then that go into the universities, and that's why they're able to have some of the facilities that they have, and they're able to grow in the ways that they do.
Right. And it, like you said, it really does leach around the university and help a lot of these other teams get players, get athletes that can come in and play with that same kind of intensity, that same kind of fire, because again, D3 sports is about heart. It's about these guys and girls that love to play their sports. And I think this is just a great example of how well Wisconsin does at keeping the athletes that do love their sports in their state and compete the same way.
Absolutely. And it's why we love Division III sports, because of the competitive balance, I think I'll say it that way, that exists within the borders here in the state of Wisconsin that make it so much fun to cover. All right. Little Bobby Brown in the background taking us out of here again tonight. Fiserv Forum, new edition. Giddy up. Let's go. All right. Don't forget, Michigan State, TCU, Iowa State, St. John's. Those are the Money Trains picks going into this weekend. Our thanks to Representative Alex Dahlman of the 39th District for joining us to talk about that NIL bill. For the Professor Dan Underberg, for Charlie Usen, I'm Don Wachillis. Thank you as always. It's been College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by Potawatomi Sportsbook.